Hello my friends, this is FC7 and today I'm going to share part 2 in my series of EverQuest Memory videos. This collection will focus on memories that are a little bit more serious and darker in tone than the first video that I put out. The video I'm going to start out with here is a subject that I feel is the root cause of a lot of the game's current issues, and that is real money transactions being introduced to the game. After that video, it's just a random assortment of different memories that hopefully a lot of former EQ players can relate to, and a lot of people who have never played MMOs can get a glimpse of. The audio for these were originally recorded around 2017, 2018, taken down from YouTube by myself and re-uploaded just in 2020, so keep that in mind. So I'm going to start out with the video labeled RMT Destroyed Paradise Legends of Norrath 2007. Hello everybody, this is FC7 and I run an EverQuest fan channel on YouTube. Now, one of the things I like to do on the channel is go over old memories about the game. It can be pretty much anything, and just put them out on video and discuss them. I like to discuss things from a player's perspective, someone who's been playing close to 20 years now. So far I've covered a wide range of topics. Some are good, some are bad, and tonight's is a little bit strange because it goes beyond bad and into devastating. In fact, I would say it's the worst thing to ever happen to the game. And it involves the three most dreaded letters in this hobby, and I'm talking RMT. What is RMT? That means real money trading, also known as selling virtual items for real money, also known as pay to win, also known as loot boxes. Now, if you're a gamer and you're watching this, I'm 100% certain you know exactly what this means. It's the cancer of the industry. It's a thing we all hate with a passion, and for good reason. It is an opportunity for gaming companies to take monetary advantage of their customers, if they decide to do so. And unfortunately, just that happened in EQ back in 2007, and that's what this video is going to be about. I'm going to give the facts about what exactly happened, and then give my opinion afterward. Okay, so to get started, RMT came into the game in the form of a card game, and the card game was named Legends of Norrath. It was announced at Fanfare 2007 and released September 9th, 2007. It closed down in 2016, but was replaced with the cash shop, so the stuff is still around. Now, I wasn't at the fanfare in 2007 when it was announced, but there were people there who, as soon as they heard the information, posted it on the official forums. It was actually a card game that you played kind of like Magic the Gathering, and you bought these things called digital booster packs for. I think the booster packs were like $5 each, and you had a small chance of getting an item that you could claim. But mostly you would just get cards to use in this digital game. Now, after the player base got the information about what it was all about, the forums just erupted like I had never seen before. And I'm talking probably the longest running thread in the forum's history. This would be the old forums, but it probably went on like 3,000 replies. To say the player base was angry would be an understatement. They were absolutely angry, and they had every right to be. I remember I was upset right along with them. So what happened was the developers had to step in and do damage control. So they came up with kind of a compromise at the time, and that was these booster packs would drop in the game off of any random mob that was light blue, that conned light blue or higher. And just a quick side note about that, it didn't last long. They pulled it after like a year. So anyway, the forums are erupting with angry and disappointed customers that are making their thoughts known. The developers are sitting there trying to do damage control, but there's not much they can do. And then the president of SOE at the time actually steps in and creates his only forum post I had ever seen at the time. In fact, I'm pretty sure it was his only forum post ever in the history of the forums. I believe in this particular post is where we got the famous line, "We are not going to be selling power." That's what we were to be assured of. They would not be selling power. I think that quote still exists to this day, and a lot of EverQuest veterans use that sometimes. It's pretty funny. Okay, so that's pretty much the end of the interaction we had with the developers about the card game. And I'm almost positive that they lost hundreds, if not maybe 1,000 or more players from this decision. But they must have done the research and came to the conclusion that they would make more money by selling these cards than having people stick around and subscribing to the game. So that's it. That's how it happened. That's how selling items for real money came into being. And we were lied to, because in the very first release of Legends of Norrath, there was an item that was a clicky that gave you something like 10,000 endurance and 5,000 mana back every time you clicked it. It had a rather long reuse time, but it could make or break a raid at the time. So it was indeed very powerful. There was also a chance to get experience potions that gave you extra experience from using them. So that's selling power as well. I also remember going through this thread, reading it, and seeing this phrase that kept coming up. And people kept saying slippery slope. And I really didn't understand what it meant at the time. I had to do some research. These forum posters were brilliant because after researching slippery slope, I knew exactly what they meant. That's when we got the foot in the door and introduced the idea of selling items little by little. It would get stronger and stronger, which is exactly what happened. Over the years, as more expansions to the card game were released, more power was introduced to things like illusions and familiars that you could get as items, which is exactly what the player base was worried about. Items kept getting more and more powerful. What started out as a 25% experience boost turned into a 50%, and I don't even know what they're up to now. So I believe at this time, we stopped looking like loyal customers, and we were perceived more as an ATM machine or a piggy bank. So now that I got the facts out of the way, I'm going to offer my opinion on this. And my opinion is actually going to start out in the form of a story. Back in the 1990s, I had a relative who was really into an NBA basketball team, a local NBA basketball team. I mean, he'd go to most of the games, he'd spend hundreds of dollars on seats. He was just a super fan. One day, after a game, he was going down a hallway to, use a bathroom or something. While going down the hallway, he sees one of the players, and it was one of the star players on the team. And my relative goes up to him, wanting to say hello and maybe get an autograph. And the player just looks over and spits at him, in his general direction, just spits. So while telling me this story, my relative had this devastated and depressed look on his face, which is completely understandable. So it's not hard to compare this analogy. The player base looked up to a company, and basically the company looked in their general direction and just, spit at them, at least in my opinion. We as MMO players were introduced to a world where everybody was considered equal. Somebody making $30,000 a year would be next to somebody making 6 figures a year, and it wouldn't matter. Nobody could use their wealth from the real world and influence the game world. That just didn't happen. One minute we were in a world where wealth differences meant nothing, into a world where wealth differences meant something. The idea of wealth inequities and class differences, that's the kind of stuff I was trying to escape from, and all of a sudden it was thrust back into the game world where it really didn't belong. It used to be time invested in your character and knowledge of your class made the difference on a raid. Now all of a sudden you could just click an item you bought and that would make the difference right there. It was not only the wealthy that were buying these, it was also people who could not afford to actually buy them, that were buying them anyways and going into debt or spending money they couldn't afford. Witnessing this whole event was just disgusting as a player, and it was very disillusioning. So much so that I still consider the golden age of EQ to have ended September 4th. 2007, a day before the card game was actually released. I know if you were to ask a lot of EQ vets when the Golden Age ended, they would probably say right before Luckland was released. But for those of us who'd stuck around, the second generation players, this is probably it. And it's a good thing that the old-timers were not around to see this happen to the game. It used to be when I started that EQ was like a ray of sunshine. For those in my generation who grew up in the 80s and the early 90s, you really didn't have many heroes to look up to, anything positive. Then, of course, we suffered through the Clinton era and 9/11. I believe that turned my generation very cynical. So when you had something offered to us like Norrath, it was almost like stepping into the Garden of Eden. Someplace magical and someplace to escape to. Someplace perfect, but only for a short amount of time. Because just like in the biblical account, where you had the serpent show up and offer the apple, in this case, you had greed show up and offer the Legends of Norrath booster card. So that should just about do it for this video. If anybody has an opinion to offer, I would appreciate it below. Maybe offer an opinion, offer a comment, thumbs up or thumbs down. Thanks for watching. When thinking back on my collection of memories that almost go back 20 years now, they usually fall into one of three categories. There's either positive, negative, or other. The memory I'm about to share falls into the other category. It's a memory that's filled with both tragedy and admiration. It's about a female warrior who I was guildmates with a long time ago. Hers is the kind of story you don't hear when you hear people talk about MMOs and their memories of being in MMOs. For some reason, it's as if the podcasters I listen to and the YouTube videos that I watch completely avoid negativity altogether. The focus seems more on the first dragon they fought or the first piece of loot that they looted. In many ways, the game is like an onion where you have multiple layers. Most people just talk about the top layer. They never really dig deep and get to the real stories. Now, when you're in a guild and you see the same people day after day, every day, for hours and hours and hours, you start to hear about their personal lives. And most people would like to keep that stuff private. But sometimes it's unavoidable that your personal life would interfere with your gameplay. So the memory of this specific person started when I was around 3 years into the game. I had gone through a couple of guilds and I had settled on a new one. After about 6 months, I felt like I had known most of the members pretty well. And most of the time, I was in pickup groups with this guild. We had this female warrior tank. And I started to notice a pattern appear after a while. Because always out of the blue, she would tell us that her husband needed her and she'd be right back. This would happen like all the time when I was grouped with her. So after one day, when she was doing this more than usual, while she was AFK, I sent a tell to a fellow guild member, and I asked, why does she always go AFK like this? He came back with an unexpected reply. He was like, oh, her husband is paralyzed from the neck down. The reason she's going AFK all the time is because she's sitting next to him while playing. She's acting as his caretaker, and he frequently needs help. And then he told me to visit the guild forums, and I'd see what he means. So I visited the guild forums, and everything started to fall into place. Because she had posted the whole story on the forums, and even had pictures of her, like, standing next to her husband while he was laying in bed paralyzed. What happened was, he was in the military. and I think he was in Afghanistan. The truck he was in got blown up by an IED. So the rest of his life, he's going to be paralyzed from the neck down. After that, it all made sense. Everybody in the guild stepped up to help her all the time, because a lot of us felt compassion for her and her situation. I even remember this one time where she was like, guys, I have to go. My keyboard's all wet. I'm crying at the keyboard. I have to wipe this stuff off. I guess she had tears all over her keyboard keys. So the story was tragic. Even though we're not in the same guild anymore and it's years later, the last I heard, she's still doing the same thing. She's still with her husband. I don't know if she still plays EverQuest anymore. It's been forever since I saw her. And come to think of it, she's probably the only true female warrior I've ever seen in the game. And I suspect she picked that class because she needed to be tough and she needed to be strong. Hello everybody, this is FC7, and today I'm going to share a story from my years playing EverQuest. It's a story I wish I would not have to share, simply because of how tragic and heartbreaking it is. But the end result was truly something amazing, and it really brought everybody on the server together, and it helped show me that there are really good people out there. People that come together in times of tragedy. So this story has to do with a couple, a married couple, who were very well known on the server, and even I was guilded with one of them for a while, and I knew of the other one. And what happened was that they were killed in a car crash. It looks like this took place in Missouri in 2012. The couple had just had a new baby, and they were taking the baby up to see his grandparents. While on the way there, I guess a car pulled out in the other lane and struck them head on, killing the couple instantly, and the 3-year-old died later at the hospital. And I guess they found the infant on the side of the road in a ditch with just scratches. And the truly terrible thing was, she had just been released from the hospital that day, I guess, with the baby. So they were on their way to the grandparents, basically just from the hospital, and they got into this car accident and they died. Now, I had mentioned in previous videos about how the server that I'm on is almost like a small community, and everybody knows everybody knows each other's reputation. It's truly it's like a small town. When people on the server found out exactly what happened, there was an outpouring of grief, and it really led to everybody coming together. We really had never experienced anything like that before on the server. It was almost like a couple in our small town, in our small community, had just died suddenly and without warning. And worst of all were the circumstances involved. Thinking back, I believe he was a tank in my guild, like a warrior, and she was a cleric, and I believe I used to ask her for buffs in the guild lobby every once in a while. So I remember them, and even if you're not friends with people closely, you still know of other people because you see these people almost every day. And out of respect, I'm not going to say their names, but she did have a very unique name. I'll give her that. It was pretty cool. The amazing part of this story comes when everybody on the server planned a memorial service, and this was to be in the Plane of Tranquility. The Plane of Tranquility has to be the most beautiful zone in the game, so it was a fitting zone. I know I take a lot of my screenshots for my YouTube videos in that zone. So the people planning it made a very good choice. So what happened was the memorial service took place, and it was like everybody on the server was there. It was truly amazing, and it's an experience I'll never forget. Everybody came together to honor their fellow fallen heroes. So that should just about do it for this video. Any questions or comments, leave them below. I really don't like to do stories about people who have been lost, but I figured in this case, considering what happened with the community, it was a story worth telling, and the server truly lost 2 heroes that day. It's very rare that any of the memory videos that I post have to do with my raiding days. And as some people who follow my channel probably know, raiding wasn't my favorite part of EQ at all. But today I'm going to share a memory that has to do with my raiding days. It's centered around one event, and more specifically, one person. But in order to tell this story successfully, I have to go back a little bit. When I was younger, I was never involved in any competitive sports. I was the kind of guy who would be the one who would be across the street smoking in all black. I was no fan of the people who played competitive sports, the jocks, anything like that. So when I joined an endgame raiding guild, I was prepared for that kind of competitiveness and just the idea of working as a team together to fulfill an objective. My goal at the time was just to join an endgame raiding guild, fulfill my goal of being at the top of the raiding game, and then quit. And when I did join, just as I suspected, the raid leader and the guild leader was, he fulfilled every stereotype that I had of a very competitive, very demanding, very tough person. And it's definitely an environment that I wasn't used to and I wasn't very comfortable in. I mean, every positive trait you could say about this guy was pretty much the opposite for me. He was a great leader. He could command people to do what he wanted, and people wouldn't complain. Me, I can't lead anybody. I can hardly lead a group. I certainly can't lead a guild or a raid. He was good at raid strategy, which is why I think we were so successful during those days. Um, Aside from knowing my class very well and maybe being a little bit talented in a couple areas, I really can't strategize and do stuff like that. But one thing I like to think I am good at is seeing the greatness in others. And this guy pretty much had it all when it came to being a great raid leader, guild leader, etc. Which leads into my memory. This took place back when the Serpent Spawn was released, and it was in a zone called Frost Crypt. So this particular night, we had just finished a few events in the zone, and there was a new one that we hadn't tried yet. And it was the end of the night, and a lot of people started to log out, but the guild leader was like, hey, wait, let's try this. Nobody log out yet. And I can imagine you'd almost hear a collective groan from everybody, because trying a new event at the end of the night, it's obvious you're not going to win because you don't have any strategies, you haven't practiced. Sometimes it would take up to a week to learn a new event and actually defeat it. So maybe 10 to 15 people logged out, and we were around 40 people, 45 maybe. And if anybody listening is familiar with the Frost Crypt raid instance, you know that there's tons and tons of giants that you have to clear. So just getting to the event itself took forever. So eventually we got there. We knew nothing about what was going to happen, and the raid leader was like, okay, let's start this. So the event started, and I expected to quickly be, destroyed by this event that we were unfamiliar with. We didn't know any of the strategies. We were down by 10 or 15 raiders. So basically the prospects of winning weren't very good. I don't remember the specific event, but I do remember there were ice columns that would shoot up from the ground, and there would be spots where you had to melee the ice to get through a different area. It was super confusing to me, but that's when the raid leader stepped up and did something that was amazing. About a minute and a half into the event, He surprised everyone when he said in guild chat, I have this figured out. This is what we need to do. And he started to give orders. He gave orders to specific people. He gave orders to specific groups within the raid. Basically, he had this figured out, and he was telling everybody how to win. There was lots of confusion. There were mobs spawning everywhere. There were ice columns shooting up from the ground. People were dying left and right, but he kept telling people, res, res. And eventually, on the very first try, we beat the event. It was one of the most, if not the most, amazing display of raid leadership and determination I had ever seen in the game. It's amazing how everything fell into place that night, and it was a privilege to have even been there to witness it. So this particular memory is not so much to recall the event itself and how we beat it so easily on the first try. This one made me reflect upon my own self and my own place in the game. It's almost scary to realize that there are people out there that can go a minute into a raid event, a complicated raid event, and have it all figured out. And not only that, but give orders on how to beat it. It's something I wouldn't be able to do in a million years. Okay, so that should just about do it. One final thought. Keep in mind this was like 11 or 12 years ago in a completely different guild. So if you see the tag that I'm using right now, it's not the same guild that I was in. This memory is notable because as I look back on it, I still don't know if the person involved was serious or not. It takes place probably back in late 2003. I was in a pickup group, and we were just chatting, making small talk, when the subject of rare items in the game came up. This guy in the group talks about buying and selling rare items for real life money. And of course I'm kind of curious because I've heard about buying and selling items before, but I've never actually talked to anybody that has done it. So I was curious because even back then, rare items and items that no longer dropped were interesting to me. By that time, I had already known about the Mana Stone and the pre-nerf Circlet of Shadow, but I had no idea what they actually sold for in real life money. So then this guy brings up the subject of the fungus-covered greatstaff. And for those unaware, it's an item that gives you a health regeneration buff, which was hugely popular to the Necromancer class back then, because our most important buff slowly drains our health while regenerating our mana. And the way to lessen or stop the amount of health drain was to have a regeneration buff or regeneration items on you. Anyways, I tell him I know of the item because I've read about it. There was a really fantastic Necromancer specific forum back then. I believe it was called EQ Necro, but I'm not sure. And the people on the forum used to talk about this item, so I knew of it. And he's like, okay, you're a Necro, you need this item, I can sell it to you. So I was like, exactly how much would it be? And he says, $5,000. By this time, the pickup group we were in was ending, and he gave me his phone number and told me if I was interested in buying it to give him a call. I just sat there stunned for a while, because that's a ridiculous amount of money for an item in a virtual world. I mean, my very first vehicle wasn't even $5,000. So of course I said, no way. This guy's got to be messing with me. So I forgot about it and didn't think of it again for years and years and years. What brought this memory back up was a guildmate I had during the time Legends of Norrath was released. And this was the card game where you bought these packs of cards and there could be a booster inside that gives you an actual in-game item. Well, he ended up spending over $3,000 or $4,000 on boxes of these things. These are like virtual boxes, they're not real, just to get loot items. So I thought to myself, okay, there must be people out there willing to spend thousands of dollars on this game. I'm not one of them. So that made me think that this guy was actually serious and offering me a fungus-covered staff for $5,000. And as one last note, like a year later, this item came back into the game in the form of the casino, the Shadowhaven Casino. So I'm thinking he must have known about it, and he was just trying to unload it on me, but I guess I'll never know. So that's it for this memory. Once again, if anybody has their own memories they'd like to share, stories, questions, just post them below or send me a message and I'll answer them in a future video. Well, thanks for watching. Hello everybody, this is FC7. Today I thought I would share some stories with people, some memories of EverQuest. But they're not going to be my memories. I went out to Reddit and asked people if they would share theirs. So this is going to be a collection of different Reddit users' memories. I know I've been sharing my own for like the last year, but I thought I'd try something a little bit different, and hopefully you enjoy it. The first story comes from Sewer Golem from Reddit. My favorite moments were playing in Unrest and Castle Mistmore back in 1999. They were fun and challenging zones with lots of ads, and they required people to be on their toes. A lot of players learned to play their classes in those zones. Unfortunately, after Kunark was released, everyone just wanted to grind in the Over There and Dreadlands. It became extremely difficult to get people into the dungeons thereafter. Everyone wanted to play it safe. Another favorite zone of mine was Najina. It was fun, it was different, and if you were a magician, you spent a good amount of time there to gather components for the early pet focuses. Also, want to throw this out there. By far, the most difficult quest mission I've been a part of was Tipped. Mind you, this was while being level 70. I can't imagine how painful that hurdle was for level 65s when Gates of Discord first came out. Next memory is from user Mitsuki Kira. Back pre-Kunark, I recall running my former main, a dwarf paladin and an old Kazakh Thule, around a state of unrest. Must have been around level 13 or 14. Having a hard time on the left side of the house, near the back door. I could handle the skeletons, but the mummies were too much. I got a tell from the guy who turned out to be my best friend in EQ, Kalazar, a Wood Elf Ranger. He asked if I needed a group, as his kind of needed a pally. I said, yeah, sure, this isn't easy. Joined the group and saw they were all the same guild, Legion of the Chosen. Sir Kerub, Keftia, Gemma, Kalazar, and Tekkanen. We played for hours in Unrest, and they asked if I wanted to join the guild. Little did I know that every member of the Chosen lived in the tiny-ass North Washington town that I did. What are the chances that I'd run across an EQ guild in my own hometown? I was stoked. We often got together outside of EQ, getting together at someone's house to watch Lord of the Rings, before going down to the theater to watch Return of the King on release night, heading to Linwood to play volleyball in Anderson Park because the day was gorgeous, barbecues to celebrate a raid target down. I sure wish we had kept in touch. The next story comes from user VDubGolf. I started around 2000 and remember my computer being so bad I had to have a small fan pointed into the open case to prevent it from shutting down every 5 minutes. Also, the monitor was so dark I could only play characters with Ultravision. Those were the best days, though. From user Ranger P. I was a halfling rogue. It was 1999. I had just made a level 10 and some friends suggested I go to Crushbone. Being a new game and a new player, I knew very little and started my run. I made it through Kithakor Forest, crossed the Common Lands, and onto the boat in Freeport. The boat stopped on Sister's Island, and I thought, an island, and got off the boat to explore. As soon as I stepped off the boat, I was immediately killed by an inhabitant, and back in Misty Thicket, with no money and no idea how to get my body back. It took about 10 hours to get my corpse back because none of my friends or myself could kill the sister on the dock. A level 30 ranger joined us and killed the mob so I could get my gear back. I've been real life friends with the ranger since. 18 years. From Reddit user Legion009. Classic EverQuest doing a Befallen run. I was a level 18 paladin and our little pickup group of 5 managed to make it all the way to the troll spawn at the end. As you know in EQ, this is no small feat. Any death means everyone dies. At our level, we were going to have to beg someone to help us with a corpse run, which would likely be 1 to 2 hours long. We were all on the edge, and the troll actually spawned and had the bone-bladed claymore. We took him down, and the group gave the weapon to me. I offered to pay everyone to compensate them, and every single group member refused. That meant so much to a young me. It was sheer camaraderie at the end of a long, hard dungeon. I'll remember that feeling for my entire life. From user DuckForce1, I can't remember if it was Christmas 1999 or 2000, but it was Christmas Eve, and I was online in EverQuest along with quite a lot of other players. I was hanging out in the EC tunnel, and up rolls this level 5 ogre in a full red suit, says ho ho ho, sits down, and starts telling Christmas stories. I think a bunch of us spent at least an hour just sitting there in the tunnel on Christmas Eve, chatting and telling stories. EQ truly felt like a home back then. From user AS99, my friends and I would play cruel jokes on each other. We would log on to each other's accounts at odd hours of the night, bank their armor, and load them up with enough copper that it would prevent them from walking faster than a snail's pace. We'd then slowly work our way out to the oasis and camp them out underwater and wait for them to log in and drown. Okay, that was cruel. Okay, the final story comes from Aboveboard. One of my first EverQuest memories, indeed my first MMO memory, is falling into the lake area in the High Elf City with my level 2 paladin. I could not figure out how to get out, promptly drowned again trying to get my body back. Young me just assumed that's life, and started a mage instead. Didn't figure out how swimming up and down worked until a few levels later. Alright, that should just about do it. I didn't want this to go on too long. This will probably be just a part 1, and I'll do a part 2 some other day. I do appreciate people listening. I think it's important to preserve a lot of these stories. I know that I'm not the best storyteller in the world, but it would be a shame to see a lot of these stories and memories be lost to time. So I'm interested in preserving them. I'm starting a blog at EverQuestMemories.com where I'll try to gather as many memories and stories as possible if anybody ever wants to visit. Alright, that should just about do it. Everybody have a great Friday, and I'll see you later. Hello everybody, and welcome to my EverQuest YouTube channel. It's a channel where I do everything from quest walkthroughs to tips and tricks to EverQuest Memories, and that's what this video today is about. I know some people might be bored with listening to old stories, but I find it fun, and a lot of these memories will just be lost to time if they're not told. So this is actually one of my favorite parts of my YouTube channel. I love doing this stuff. So I will start the story now. This all takes place in, I believe, 2005 or 2006. I was in a small casual guild at the time, and all of us were working on getting our 1.5 epics. The devs back then were generous because they created 1.5s for the smaller guilds like mine, and for the endgamers, they created 2.0s. The guild I was in at the time, we weren't the strongest guild, and we were just barely able to defeat 1.5 encounters, but we succeeded more than we were defeated, I'll put it that way. It was nice back then because the encounters were open world, so sometimes other players in the zone would join up and help the raid that we were in. So it was kind of like an open raid, and it was almost like a server-wide event sometimes, which was pretty neat. So we would take turns week after week forming up a raid to take down targets. Everybody was like on a list, and whoever was on the list for the week, there was a raid forming up like on a Friday, and everybody would join up and take down that target. Now when my turn came up on the list for my raid target, it's like the problems immediately started. Number one, my raid leader told me that he wasn't able to be there for like the first hour of the raid, so I'd have to lead it myself. He was going to be out of town or something. Number two, I had already promised my cousin that we'd go out that night. This was the early 2000s, and I was still in my mid-20s, so I was pretty much going out every weekend instead of staying home. I mean, I couldn't necessarily tell her I'd rather stay home and play a video game than go out to the bar. So I was in a dilemma, but I figured I would just stay home anyways and go with my cousin some other time because going to the bar wasn't too fun back then. It usually consisted of me and her being at the bar. Some guy would come up and he'd be like, "You're not mad because I'm talking to your girlfriend, are you?" And I'd be like, "That's not my girlfriend, that's my cousin." And he'd be like, "You're dating your cousin?" Like, "No, I'm not dating my cousin. We're just hanging out. Go talk to her. I don't care." So that was pretty much my night at the bar. So I figured I would go all in on trying to lead this raid myself for an hour because I really wanted my 1.5. And I canceled everything else. So the night of the raid happens. And the problem started almost immediately. If you've ever been a casual guild raider, you might understand. When the regular raid leader isn't there, people are especially reluctant to raid that day. And even though the people in my guild were nice, I wasn't the most popular person there. There were people that had been in that guild longer, and they were all off in their own little cliques. So I was pretty much newer, and I don't know, people were pretty much indifferent, and they probably seemed like raiding for me, and having me as a raid leader was more of a chore than anything. So that night there was a decent turnout. Everyone seemed ready. Now I was new to raid forming, so I started out inviting people and eventually filled the raid window enough so that it actually looked like a real raid. So I'm struggling with how to lead this raid, learn the ins and outs on the fly, and the very first problem was something that had to do with organizing groups. So I'm trying to get these groups organized together, and it's just not working. So I ask in the raid how to do it, and somebody replies back, "Oh, that's going to be working in the next patch. It's broken right now." So while I'm struggling with all of this, people started to become impatient. And when people start to become impatient, they start to drop out, which is exactly what happened. People started to drop out of the raid, little by little. Finally, I just tell everybody, okay, let's just go to the zone, and we'll get this figured out there. And the zone was Noble's Causeway. This was to defeat a target named Tarlang. And as fate would have it, Tarlang is not easy to get to. He's way in the back of the zone, so that was another problem that was cropping up. So while we were in the zone, people were getting lost on the way. And keep in mind, this was before, like, the campfires and the guild banners and stuff could take you to one spot. So a lot of people had never even been to Noble's Causeway before, so they were asking in guild exactly where they were. And a lot of players were going back for them. So we had like half the raid in the zone, half the raid was lost, and the other half was going back to get the lost people to bring them in. So at this point, the people that were in the zone in Noble's Causeway were getting impatient. And some of them started to log as well. So we started out with a raid force of like 51 people, and it was down to like 45 or something like that. And I can't blame them because this had already taken like 25 to 30 minutes, and there were still people lost and not knowing where they were going to. On top of that, I'm struggling with trying to get this raid window so that everybody was in the raid in the correct order. Then when I started getting people into groups, people started sending me tells that they didn't want to be in a group with another person because they didn't like them and stuff like that. And I was getting all these tells. So some tells were that they didn't want to be in a group with somebody else because they didn't want to be with this person. And other tells were that you can't put like certain classes into raid groups with other certain classes. So I was confused. The guild comedian at the time, and I think every guild has one, sent me a tell. And he's like, "You don't know what you're doing, do you?" Ha ha ha. So after around 10 more minutes, while most of the raid is in the zone, somebody, I don't know who, starts to go towards Tarlang, towards the target. And he's like, "I'm just going to clear out some trash." But everybody in the raid started to follow him. And I was trying to say, stop, because I knew what would happen. But there was another problem that I was having at the time, and that had to do with my keyboard, because some of the keys stuck. So I would write out stop, but it would come out top most of the time. So everybody was like, he wants us to go to the top of the ledge and kill Tarlang. And I was like, no, don't, that's not what I mean. Meanwhile, people are dying left and right, and people are re-resing, but getting aggro again because the healers in the group are healing the people that are DPSing. So we'd get groups healed up and rezzed, and then it would start all over again because people were not casting invis on themselves. So we kept getting aggro, wiped, constantly. And by this point, a raid force that started out with like 50 people was down to around 35. As I'm struggling to regain control of this raid, finally the raid leader logs in, the regular guy. And I immediately hand it over to him. He apologizes for being like 2 hours late. So he reforms the raid, and we decide to attempt Tarlang with like 25 people. And of course we got destroyed. The main tank told me that he got hit so hard he went link dead. So that is the story of the worst day in EverQuest I ever had. Eventually I did get my 1.5. I don't remember exactly when, it was a few months afterwards, but yeah, this was a story that really stuck with me for all these years, and I'm glad I finally got it out there. Alright, that should end this collection of memories. Look forward to part 3 soon. Everybody have a great rest of your day.